The ballroom erupted. 500 people dressed in their finest evening wear rose to their feet as one. The thunderous applause rolled through the grand hall like a wave bouncing off crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Cameras flashed. Women dabbed tears from their eyes, careful not to smear their makeup. Men who had spent decades in the classical music world stood with their mouths open, unable to process what they had just witnessed. At the center of it all, seated at a magnificent Steinway grand piano, was a man no one had expected to see there. His weathered hands still rested on the ivory keys. His worn jacket, frayed at the cuffs, seemed out of place among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. His graying beard and tired eyes told a story of hard years and harder nights. But those hands had just done something impossible. The standing ovation continued for a full minute, then 2. The applause showed no signs of stopping. Some people were openly weeping. Others simply stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. This was the moment when everything changed. But to understand how we got here, to truly appreciate what just unfolded in this grand Chicago ballroom, we need to go back. Back 60 minutes to when this same man first walked through those doors. Back to when every single person in this room looked at him with disgust, with contempt, with pity. Back to the beginning. 60 minutes earlier, the entrance to the Grand Meridian Hotel gleamed under the soft glow of evening lights. Luxury vehicles pulled up one after another, depositing Chicago's elite onto the red carpet. This was the annual Harmony Foundation Charity Gala, one of the most prestigious events of the social season. $500 a plate. Musicians, philanthropists, and old money families gathering to celebrate the arts while sipping champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The theme this year was a night of musical excellence. The ballroom had been transformed into an elegant concert hall, complete with a stage professional lighting, and at its center, a gorgeous Steinway Model D grand piano, worth over $200,000. The evening's entertainment would include performances by students from the city's top music academies, culminating in a showcase by rising stars in the classical music world. Outside valets in crisp uniforms hurried back and forth. Women in shimmering gowns glided through the entrance, their jewelry catching the light. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos checked their phones and exchanged business cards before even making it inside. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the particular kind of confidence that comes with inherited wealth. And then he appeared. Elijah Brooks emerged from the evening shadows and approached the entrance. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with broad shoulders that suggested he had once been stronger, more solid. But years had worn him down. His dark skin was weathered, creased with lines that came from sleeping outdoors and squinting against the sun. His hair, once probably thick and full, was now graying and patchy. He wore an old brown jacket that had seen better days, the kind you might find at a thrift store, with jeans that were clean but faded, and shoes that had been repaired multiple times. Under his arm, he carried a small envelope. The first person to notice him was one of the valets, a young man in his 20s. The valet's smile, so warm and welcoming for the previous guests, faltered. He glanced at his colleague, uncertain. Elijah walked slowly, deliberately toward the red carpet. His steps were measured as though he was steeling himself for what was about to happen. Because he knew. He had known this would be hard from the moment he decided to come. "Sir." The valet stepped forward, his hand raised slightly. "Sir, I'm sorry, but this is a private event." Elijah stopped. He met the young man's eyes, and for a moment neither spoke. Then quietly Elijah reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. From it, he extracted a cream-colored invitation embossed with gold lettering. "I was invited," he said simply. His voice was deeper than the valet expected, resonant, the kind of voice that carried weight. The valet took the invitation hesitantly, his eyes scanning it. It looked legitimate. The Harmony Foundation seal, the date, the time. But this man, this homeless-looking man in front of him, couldn't possibly belong here. Let me just check with someone," the valet stammered, pulling out a radio. By now, other guests had noticed the commotion. A woman in a silver gown whispered to her companion, both of them staring. Another couple approaching the entrance slowed their pace, their expressions shifting from curiosity to distaste. "Is that man bothering you?" asked a gentleman in his 60s, his tuxedo immaculate, his tone dripping with the kind of authority that comes from a lifetime of being listened to. "No, sir. He's clearly not supposed to be here," the man continued, not waiting for an answer. He turned to Elijah, his lip curling slightly. "Friend, I don't know what you're trying to do, but this isn't the place for panhandling. There's a shelter 3 blocks east. I suggest you head there." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He simply held out the invitation toward the gentleman. The man didn't even look at it. "Those can be faked," he said dismissively. "Security," he snapped his fingers. 2 security guards, both built like former athletes, approached from inside the lobby. The situation was escalating quickly. More guests had stopped to watch. Phones came out. This was already becoming a story they would tell at dinner parties. "Gentlemen?" Elijah said, his voice calm but firm. "I have an invitation. I was asked to be here. I'm not causing any trouble." One of the security guards, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense expression, took the invitation from the valet. He examined it carefully, then spoke into his radio, checking with someone inside. The seconds stretched. Elijah stood completely still. His hands at his sides, his expression unreadable. But anyone paying close attention would have seen it, the slight tremor in his fingers, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched. This wasn't easy for him. The security guard's radio crackled. A voice on the other end confirmed that the invitation was a legitimate part of a community outreach program the foundation had started. The guard's expression didn't change, but he stepped aside. "You can go in," he said flatly. Elijah nodded once and walked forward. As he passed through the golden doors into the hotel lobby, he could feel every eye on him. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People physically moved away, creating a bubble of space around him, as though poverty might be contagious. The lobby was magnificent. Vaulted ceilings, marble floors, enormous flower arrangements that probably cost more than Elijah had seen in cash in the past 5 years. Classical music played softly through hidden speakers. Everything was designed to make guests feel special, important, wealthy. Elijah walked through it all, his head held high, even as people stared, whispered, and judged. He had made it inside. But the hardest part was yet to come. The ballroom was even more impressive than the lobby. Elijah paused at the entrance, taking it in. Round tables covered in white linens surrounded a central stage area. The Steinway grand piano sat like a jewel under soft spotlights. Floral centerpieces, gold-rimmed china crystal glasses catching the light from 3 massive chandeliers overhead. The ceiling had been painted to look like a night sky, complete with twinkling stars created by tiny fiber optic lights. It was beautiful. It was also full of people who wanted him gone. Elijah could feel it the moment he entered. Conversations didn't just pause, they stopped completely. Heads turned, eyes widened. A woman actually gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace as though she needed to protect it. He found the table assigned to his invitation number, table 47, near the back of the room. The farthest from the stage, naturally. As he approached, the three couples already seated there exchanged glances. One by one, they stood up, gathered their clutch purses and drink glasses, and moved to different tables. They didn't even pretend to have a reason. They just left. Elijah sat down alone at a table meant for 8. A server approached, young and clearly uncomfortable. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Sir, water would be fine, thank you," Elijah said quietly. The server nodded and hurried away, grateful for the excuse to leave. Elijah sat in the plush chair, his calloused hands resting on the pristine white tablecloth. He looked so out of place it was almost comical, and people were definitely finding it amusing. At a nearby table, 2 women in evening gowns leaned toward each other, not even bothering to lower their voices much. "Can you believe they let him in?" "It's probably some kind of publicity stunt. You know how these foundations are now always trying to prove how progressive they are? Well, I think it's inappropriate. This is supposed to be an elegant evening, not a soup kitchen." They laughed sharp and cruel. Elijah heard every word. He always did. When you're homeless, you become invisible to people, but you're never quite invisible enough. You hear what they say. You see how they look at you, or rather how they look through you, as though you're not quite human enough to deserve their acknowledgement. He had lived with this for 25 years. You'd think he'd be used to it by now. You'd be wrong. The server returned with his water, setting it down quickly and retreating. Elijah took a sip, the glass heavy and expensive in his rough hands. Around him, the gala continued. People mingled, laughed, performed the elaborate social dance of the wealthy. Music students began setting up on stage for their performances. The evening's program was about to begin. And then she saw him. Helena Rothstein stood near the stage clipboard in hand, coordinating the evening's musical performances. She was in her mid-60s, impeccably dressed in a burgundy gown that probably cost more than a used car. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. As the director of the prestigious Chamberlain Academy of Music, she commanded respect in Chicago's classical music circles. She had launched careers, destroyed others with a single scathing review, and considered herself one of the city's most important cultural gatekeepers. She was scanning the ballroom, making sure everything was in place, when her eyes landed on table 47. She froze. Her expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally something that looked almost like fear. She blinked hard, as if she might be seeing things. Then she looked again. It was him. It couldn't be him, but it was. Helena's hand tightened on her clipboard. She turned sharply to a woman beside her, another music academy director named Patricia Hensworth, and whispered urgently. Patricia looked where Helena was pointing. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," Patricia breathed. "Is that?" "It is," Helena said, her voice tight. "What is he doing here?" Without another word, Helena strode across the ballroom, Patricia hurrying behind her. Other guests noticed the determined march of the 2 powerful women and followed with their eyes, curious about what drama was about to unfold. Helena stopped directly in front of Elijah's table. He had been looking down at his water glass, but he felt her presence and slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. For a moment, neither spoke. Elijah, Helena said finally, his name coming out clipped and cold. "Mrs. Rothstein, he replied evenly. What are you doing here? He gestured slightly to the table to the place setting in front of him. I was invited. Invited? Helena repeated as though the word tasted bad. By whom? The Foundation's outreach program, Elijah said. They sent invitations to several community centers and shelters. I received one. Helena's nostrils flared. This is a fundraising gala for serious musicians, Elijah. This isn't appropriate. Appropriate? Elijah echoed quietly. I see. Patricia leaned in close to Helena and whispered, but loud enough for Elijah to hear. Is this the same man from… Yes. Helena cut her off sharply, though I hardly recognized him. Her eyes swept over Elijah with barely disguised disgust. Time hasn't been kind, has it? Something flickered in Elijah's eyes. Pain, maybe, or anger, but his voice remained calm. No, it hasn't. By now, their confrontation had drawn significant attention. Nearby tables had gone quiet, people leaning in to listen. Someone near the stage nudged a board member pointing toward the scene. I think it would be best. Helena continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone used to being obeyed if you left voluntarily. This event is for donors, patrons of the arts, and accomplished musicians. You don't fit any of those categories anymore. I have an invitation. Elijah repeated, his voice still level, but with an edge now. A legitimate invitation. I have every right to be here. Rights. Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. You gave up your rights to be part of this world a long time ago, Elijah. You walked away. You made your choice. I didn't walk away, Elijah said, and for the first time emotion crept into his voice. I was buried. We all have our sob stories, Patricia interjected coldly. That doesn't mean we get to crash elegant events looking like we crawled out of an alley. A man in his 50s approached the table. Gerald Morehouse, one of the gala's primary donors, and a prominent real estate developer. He had been watching the exchange with interest and decided to insert himself into the drama. Is there a problem here, Helena? He asked, his tone suggesting he was ready to solve whatever problem existed, probably with money or influence. Mr. Morehouse, Helena began. This man has wandered in off the street, and I have an invitation, Elijah said, again pulling it from his jacket and placing it on the table. The embossed paper sat there, undeniable proof. Gerald picked it up, examined it, and frowned. Well, it does appear to be authentic. He looked at Elijah with the kind of curiosity reserved for zoo animals. You're from one of the shelters? Yes, Elijah said simply. And you came to a charity gala? Hoping for what exactly? A handout? A free meal? I came because I was invited, Elijah said for the fourth time. And because once a long time ago I belonged in rooms like this. Helena's face went rigid. Don't you dare! Oh, this just got interesting. Gerald interrupted, a slow smile spreading across his face. Helena, do you know this man? Helena's silence was answer enough. Gerald's smile widened. He was enjoying this now the way wealthy people enjoy watching other people's discomfort. Well then, if our distinguished director of the Chamberlain Academy knows this gentleman, and he has a legitimate invitation, I see no reason why he shouldn't stay. He paused, his eyes glinting with mischief. Unless, of course, there's some other reason you want him gone. Helena's jaw clenched. She was trapped, and she knew it. She couldn't explain why she wanted Elijah gone without revealing their shared history, something she clearly had no intention of doing. Fine, she said tightly. He can stay. but if he causes any disruption, I won't." Elijah said quietly. Gerald clapped his hands together, delighted by the drama he had just witnessed. "Wonderful. See, everything worked out." He leaned down slightly toward Elijah, his expression becoming calculating. "Though if you're going to stay friend, you should at least make it worth everyone's while. We're here to celebrate music after all." He gestured toward the stage, toward the beautiful Steinway. "Can you play?" Elijah's eyes moved to the piano. Something crossed his face. Longing, fear, pain, all mixed together. He didn't answer immediately. "I thought so," Gerald said, straightening up. "Well, no matter. Enjoy your free meal." He walked away, chuckling to himself. Helena leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper, meant only for Elijah. "Stay if you must. Sit here and remember what you threw away. But don't you dare go near that piano. Don't you dare pretend you're still one of us." She turned and walked away, Patricia following like a loyal shadow. The crowd that had gathered slowly dispersed, disappointed that the drama had ended without more fireworks. Conversations resumed, though many people continued to glance toward table 47, where Elijah sat alone, staring at the piano on stage. His hands were shaking now, just slightly. Not from fear or nervousness, but from something else. Something that had been locked away for so long he had almost forgotten what it felt like. Hope. The evening's program began shortly after the confrontation. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated the stage. The gala's master of ceremonies, a smooth-talking radio host named Brandon Michaels, took the microphone and welcomed everyone with practiced enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 35th Annual Harmony Foundation Charity Gala. Tonight we celebrate the transformative power of music and the incredible young talents who represent the future of classical performance." Applause rippled through the ballroom. Brandon continued introducing the first performer, a 16-year-old violinist from the Chamberlain Academy. The girl was talented, her technique clean and precise. She performed a movement from a Vivaldi concerto, and when she finished, the audience applauded warmly. She bowed her face glowing with pride and exited the stage. More performances followed. A cellist, a soprano, a string quartet. Each was accomplished, each received generous applause from the well-dressed crowd. These were the children of privileged students who had access to the best teachers, the finest instruments, and the luxury of time to practice. They were good, very good. But there was something mechanical about it all, something safe. They played the notes perfectly, but there was no soul, no pain, no lived experience behind the music. They were technicians, not artists. Not yet. Elijah watched from his table in the back, his water glass still half full, his meal untouched despite the server's multiple attempts to take his order. He couldn't eat. His stomach was in knots. Being here in this room, hearing this music, seeing that piano, it was bringing back memories he had spent decades trying to bury. He closed his eyes, and just for a moment let himself remember. The feel of the keys beneath his fingers. The way the music would flow through him, not from him as if he were just a channel for something larger. The applause. The standing ovations. The critics who called him a genius. The future that stretched out before him bright and infinite and guaranteed. All of it gone. He opened his eyes again, and the ballroom came back into focus. The beautiful people, the expensive clothes, the world that had once been his and was now as foreign to him as the surface of the moon. The performances continued for another 30 minutes. Finally, Brandon returned to the microphone. "Thank you to all our wonderful student performers," he announced. Before we break for dinner service, I'd like to invite Mrs. Helena Rothstein, director of the Chamberlain Academy, to say a few words. Helena took the stage with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She spoke about the importance of arts education, the Foundation's mission, and the generous donors who made their work possible. It was a well-rehearsed speech delivered with polish and poise, but then her eyes drifted to the back of the ballroom, to table 47, to Elijah. And something shifted in her expression. "You know," she said, deviating from her prepared remarks tonight, "we've heard from some of the most promising young musicians in Chicago, students who understand the discipline, the dedication, and the sacrifice required to succeed in this demanding field." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. But talent alone isn't enough. Character matters. Reliability matters. Following through on your commitments matters. Several people in the audience nodded along, not understanding where this was going. "Anyone can claim to be a musician," Helena continued, her voice taking on an edge. "Anyone can say they have talent. But true artistry requires more than just skill. It requires integrity. It requires staying power." Elijah's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what she was doing. In fact, Helena said, her eyes locked on Elijah. "We have a guest here tonight who once claimed to be a musician. Someone who had every opportunity, every advantage handed to him on a silver platter. And he threw it all away." The room had gone very quiet now. People were looking around, trying to figure out who she was talking about. Helena pointed directly at Elijah. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice carrying through the sound system. "Why don't you stand up?" Every head in the ballroom turned toward table 47. Elijah didn't move at first, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Please," Helena pressed, false sweetness dripping from her voice. "Don't be shy. Everyone here should know your story. It's quite educational." Slowly, Elijah stood. 500 pairs of eyes focused on him. He could hear the whispers starting already. 30 years ago, Helena announced Elijah Brooks was considered one of the most promising piano students in the country. He attended Juilliard on a full scholarship. He won competitions. Critics compared him to the greats. She paused for effect. And then he quit. Just stopped showing up. Abandoned his education, his mentors, everyone who had invested in his success. And now here he is, 3 decades later, looking for, what exactly? Mr. Brooks' sympathy, another chance. The whispers grew louder. People were pulling out their phones, no doubt searching for information about Elijah, trying to find proof of Helena's claims. Gerald Morehouse, the developer who had intervened earlier, stood up from his table near the front. "Helena, is this really necessary? I think it is," Helena said firmly. "Because we can't just let anyone walk in here and pretend to be part of this world. Mr. Brooks gave up his right to call himself a musician a long time ago." "That's not fair," Elijah said, his voice quiet, but carrying in the silent ballroom. "You don't know what happened." "Oh, I know exactly what happened," Helena shot back. "You couldn't handle the pressure. You weren't strong enough. And rather than admitting failure, you just disappeared." "My mother Elijah started, but Helena cut him off. We all have family obligations, Mr. Brooks. We all face challenges. Real musicians find a way to overcome them." Gerald Morehouse laughed, then loud and sudden. "Well, Helena, if you're so certain he's a fraud, why not let him prove it?" Helena frowned. "What do you mean?" Gerald gestured grandly toward the stage. "Let him play. If he's as washed up as you claim, it'll be obvious. And if he's not," he shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eye, "well, then this evening just got a lot more interesting." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. People were intrigued now. This was better than any scripted entertainment. Helena's expression tightened. She clearly hadn't expected this. "That's not..." "Come on, Helena," Patricia Hensworth said from the side of the stage, surprising everyone. "If you're right about him, what's the harm? Let him embarrass himself. It'll prove your point." Helena looked trapped again. She had painted herself into a corner with her own vitriol. If she refused now, she'd look afraid of being proven wrong. "Fine," she said finally. Her voice clipped. She looked at Elijah. "You want to prove you're still a musician? Then play. Play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, the Ossia Cadenza. If you can make it through even the first movement without falling apart, I'll admit I was wrong about you." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. The Rachmaninoff Third wasn't just difficult, it was one of the most technically demanding pieces in the entire piano repertoire. Even accomplished concert pianists approached it with trepidation. The Ossia Cadenza, in particular, was notorious. Rachmaninoff himself, one of the greatest pianists who ever lived, considered it one of his most challenging compositions. For someone who hadn't touched a piano in decades, it would be impossible. That was the point. Gerald laughed again, delighted. "Oh, this is rich. Helena, you're cruel. I love it." Elijah stood frozen at his table. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. The room seemed to tilt and spin around him. The Rachmaninoff Third. He hadn't played it in 30 years, hadn't played anything in 30 years. His fingers were stiff from manual labor, his back hunched from sleeping on concrete, his mind clouded by years of just trying to survive. It was impossible. Helena knew it was impossible. That's why she chose it. "Well," Helena prompted, her arms crossed, "unless you'd like to admit that you're not a musician anymore, that you're just a homeless man who stumbled into a room where he doesn't belong." The ballroom was absolutely silent. Everyone was watching Elijah, waiting for his response. Phones were up, recording everything. This would be on social media within minutes, probably already trending. Homeless man challenged to play impossible piano piece at charity gala. It would be humiliating. It would be cruel. It would be exactly what Helena wanted. Elijah looked at the piano on stage. The beautiful Steinway gleaming under the lights. He could see the keys from here, black and white, orderly and familiar. His fingers twitched involuntarily, as if they remembered what his mind was trying to forget. And then, from somewhere deep inside, from a place he thought had died years ago, he felt something stir. Not quite hope. Not quite courage. But something. "Okay," he said quietly. The room erupted in shocked whispers. What did he say? Did he just agree? This is going to be a disaster. Helena's eyes widened slightly. She had expected him to refuse to slink away in shame. His acceptance caught her off guard. "You're sure?" she asked. And for just a moment, something that might have been guilt flickered across her face. Elijah met her eyes. "I'm sure." He walked toward the stage. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea people, stepping back as if afraid to get too close. He climbed the steps, just 4 stairs, but they felt like climbing a mountain. His legs were weak. His whole body was trembling. He reached the piano and stood beside it, one hand resting gently on its polished surface. It was warm under the stage lights. Beautiful. Perfect. He pulled out the bench and sat down. The seat was exactly the right height, adjusted for someone with long fingers and a tall frame. The piano had been maintained impeccably. He could see it in every detail, smell it in the faint scent of wood polish and the particular mustiness of felt hammers. He positioned his hands above the keys, but didn't touch them yet. He closed his eyes and remembered. 30 years earlier, Juilliard School, New York City. Elijah Brooks, at 20 years old, was a force of nature. Tall, lean, with the kind of presence that made people turn and look when he entered a room. His dark skin seemed to glow with health and vitality. His hands, those incredible hands, were strong and elegant, with long fingers that spanned effortlessly across the keyboard. He sat at a practice piano in one of Juilliard's many rehearsal rooms, working through a particularly challenging passage of Liszt. The room was small, soundproofed, with just a piano, a mirror, and a clock on the wall. He had been there for 3 hours already, and he would be there for 3 more before he allowed himself to stop. This was what genius looked like, was what genius. Not some mystical gift that appeared without effort, but thousands of hours of disciplined practice of breaking down complex problems into manageable pieces of repetition and refinement until muscle memory took over and the impossible became inevitable. Elijah had started playing piano when he was 4 years old. His mother, Lorraine Brooks, worked 2 jobs cleaning houses during the day and waiting tables at night to keep them afloat after his father had left. They lived in a tiny apartment on the south side of Chicago, in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong. But Lorraine had a dream for her son. She wanted him to have opportunities she never had to escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped so many in their community. And she noticed something special in young Elijah. The way he responded to music, the way he could hear a melody once and hum it back perfectly, the way his small fingers would drum on any surface, creating rhythms and patterns. She found an old upright piano at a church sale, paid $50 she couldn't afford, and had it delivered to their apartment. It was out of tune and missing a few keys, but it was enough. She enrolled Elijah in free community music classes, and within months the teachers were calling her amazed at the boy's natural ability. By age 7, Elijah was performing in local recitals. By 10, he had won his first competition. By 15, he had the attention of some of the most prestigious music schools in the country. And when Juilliard offered him a full scholarship room board tuition, everything Lorraine had cried with joy. Her baby was going to make it out. At Juilliard, Elijah flourished. He studied under Maestro Vladimir Petrov, a legendary pianist and notorious taskmaster who had trained some of the world's finest musicians. Petrov was Russian old-school demanding. He accepted only a handful of students, and he drove them mercilessly. But with Elijah, something was different. Petrov saw not just talent, but genius. True, rare, once-in-a-generation genius. The kind that could define an era. "You have gift," Petrov would say in his thick accent, pointing at Elijah with one gnarled finger. Not just talent. Anyone can have talent. You have gift, but gift is not enough. You must work. You must sacrifice. You must become the music. And Elijah did. He practiced 8, 10, 12 hours a day. His calluses had calluses. His hands would cramp, and he'd soak them in ice water, then start again. He won every competition he entered. The Van Cliburn, the Leeds, the Queen Elizabeth. His name became synonymous with excellence. Critics called him the most exciting young pianist since Glenn Gould. Classical music magazines featured him on their covers. Concert halls started booking him years in advance. At 20, he had already performed as a soloist with the New York Philharmonic, the Chicago Symphony, and the London Symphony Orchestra. His specialty, Rachmaninoff. Specifically, the Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor. The same piece Helena had just demanded he play. It was a piece that had destroyed lesser pianists. Rachmaninoff wrote it to showcase his own virtuosity, filling it with technical challenges that seemed designed to break fingers and spirits. The Ossia cadenza, an alternate, even more difficult version of an already brutal passage, was considered by many to be unplayable at full tempo. Elijah played it perfectly, every time. At tempo, with emotional depth, with the kind of interpretation that made seasoned musicians weep. Petrov would sit in the audience during Elijah's performances, his weathered face impassive, but afterward in private, he would allow himself a small smile. "You will be one of the greats," he told Elijah once, "perhaps the greatest." Life was perfect. Elijah was 20 years old, on the verge of international stardom, with a recording contract being negotiated and a tour of Europe scheduled for the following year. He had a girlfriend, Sarah, a talented violinist from Los Angeles, and they talked about maybe someday starting a chamber ensemble together. The world was his. And then, on a cold November night, the phone rang. Elijah was in his dorm room reviewing scores for an upcoming performance. It was late, nearly midnight. When he answered, expecting maybe Sarah or one of his classmates, he heard a voice he didn't recognize. "Is this Elijah Brooks?" "Yes, who is this?" "This is Mercy General Hospital in Chicago. We have your mother here. There's been an accident." The world stopped. Everything stopped. What happened? Elijah's voice sounded strange in his own ears, distant and hollow. "Your mother was hit by a car while crossing the street. She's in critical condition. You need to come immediately." Elijah didn't remember hanging up, didn't remember packing a bag or telling anyone where he was going. He was on a bus to Chicago within an hour, his hands shaking, his mind blank with terror. When he arrived at the hospital, he found his mother in the ICU unconscious, hooked up to machines. The doctors explained that she had severe head trauma, multiple broken bones, internal bleeding. They had operated once already. They would need to operate again. The prognosis was uncertain, and the bills were already astronomical and climbing by the hour. Elijah sat beside her bed, holding her hand, the hand that had worked so hard to give him every opportunity, the hand that had scrubbed floors and carried trays so he could pursue his dream. And he made a decision. He called Juilliard and told them he was taking a leave of absence. Temporary, he said, just until his mother recovered. He called the concert halls and canceled his upcoming performances. He called Sarah and told her he didn't know when he'd be back. And he stayed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Lorraine regained consciousness, but the damage was severe. She would need months of rehabilitation, maybe years. She couldn't work. She couldn't even walk without assistance. The medical bills piled up, crushing and relentless. Insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. Elijah started working any job he could find. Construction, warehouse work, deliveries, anything to keep them afloat. The piano receded into his past like a dream that had happened to someone else. 5 years after the accident, Lorraine Brooks died. Despite Elijah's efforts, despite the doctor's care, despite everything, her body had simply taken too much damage. The head trauma led to complications, infections, organ failure. One thing after another, a slow cascade of breakdowns, until there was nothing left to do but say goodbye. Elijah was 25 years old when he buried his mother in a simple grave in a Chicago cemetery. He stood alone at the funeral. The few friends they'd had in their neighborhood had drifted away, and his Juilliard connections had evaporated the moment he left school. Sarah had stopped calling after 6 months. "I can't do this," she had said during their last phone call. "I need someone who can be here, who can focus on us. You're never coming back, are you?" She was right. He wasn't. Petrov had sent a letter once, a brief note expressing condolences about Lorraine's accident and disappointment about Elijah's departure from the program. "You had a gift," the letter said. "It is a tragedy to waste it." There had been no offer to help, no invitation to return. In Petrov's world, dedication to music was absolute. There were no acceptable excuses for abandoning it. After Lorraine's death, Elijah tried to piece his life back together. He thought maybe he could return to music, find a way back into that world he had left behind. He went to local music schools, offering to teach, to accompany anything. But 5 years away from the piano had taken its toll. His technique had degraded. His hands, roughened by manual labor, didn't move the way they once had. And in the cutthroat world of classical music, 5 years might as well have been 50. There were always younger prodigies coming up, fresh faces with uninterrupted training and prestigious connections. Elijah Brooks, the former wunderkind, was yesterday's news. He couldn't find teaching work, couldn't find performance opportunities. The few people who remembered him treated him with pity, which was somehow worse than being forgotten entirely. The medical debt from his mother's illness was crushing. He had taken out loans, maxed out credit cards, borrowed from anyone who would lend. Now, with Lorraine gone, the bills came due. He tried to pay them. He really did. But on minimum wage from whatever jobs he could find, it was impossible. Within 2 years of his mother's death, Elijah lost everything. His apartment went first evicted for non-payment. He tried staying with acquaintances, couch surfing, but those arrangements never lasted long. Then his car was repossessed. Then his phone was disconnected. By the time he was 28, Elijah Brooks was living on the streets of Chicago. It happened gradually, the way drowning happens gradually when you're exhausted and the shore is too far away. You keep swimming, keep fighting, but eventually your muscles give out and the water pulls you under. The first night he slept outside, Elijah told himself it was temporary, just for a few days until he got back on his feet. He found a relatively safe spot under a bridge, rolled his jacket into a pillow, and tried to sleep. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow could be a threat. He didn't sleep at all that first night, just lay there shivering, wondering how his life had come to this. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years. Being homeless is not like most people imagine. It's not a romantic struggle or a temporary setback. It's a grinding, daily battle for survival that wears away your humanity piece by piece. Elijah learned to find food in dumpsters behind restaurants, to time his searches for when fresh items were thrown out. He learned which shelters were safest, which had the longest wait times, which you should avoid entirely because the danger inside was worse than the danger on the streets. He learned to become invisible, to keep his head down, avoid eye contact, move through the world like a ghost. Because visibility brought trouble. Visibility brought police who told you to move along. Visibility brought teenagers looking for someone to harass. Visibility brought business owners who called you a vagrant and threatened to call the authorities. In the winter, Chicago's cold was brutal. Elijah would spend entire days in the public library pretending to read just to stay warm. In the summer, the heat was nearly as bad, the concrete radiating stored warmth long into the night, making sleep impossible. He stopped looking in mirrors, stopped caring about his appearance. What was the point? He had nowhere to go, No one to impress, nothing to achieve. He was just trying to survive until tomorrow, and then the day after that, and then the day after that. The piano became a memory so distant, it felt like it had happened to someone else. Sometimes late at night, he would dream about performing. He'd be on stage, the lights bright, the audience rapt, his hands flying across the keys, and then he'd wake up on the cold ground, his hands stiff and aching, and the contrast between dream and reality was so painful, he wanted to scream. So he stopped allowing himself to dream. He found work when he could, day labor mostly, standing on street corners at dawn with other desperate men, hoping a contractor would pick you for a job. 12 hours of backbreaking work for $60 cash. It was something. The years blurred together. Elijah stopped counting them. What did it matter if he was 30, 35, 40? Time meant nothing when every day was the same struggle. He aged rapidly on the streets. The sun and wind weathered his skin. Poor nutrition and stress turned his hair gray prematurely. His body, once strong and healthy, became gaunt and tired. His hands, those miraculous hands that had once made music that could bring audiences to tears, became rough and scarred from manual labor. He watched younger homeless people arrive on the streets, fresh from their own catastrophes, still carrying hope that this was temporary. He watched that hope die in their eyes, usually within a few months. He watched older homeless people die, their bodies giving out from exposure or illness, or simply the accumulation of too many hard years. He wondered sometimes if he would die out here. If one winter morning they'd find him frozen under a bridge, just another sad statistic. But something in him refused to give up entirely. Some stubborn core of himself that had survived everything. He didn't know what he was surviving for, but he kept doing it anyway. And then one day, it was fall, maybe October, about 6 months before the gala. Something happened. Elijah was walking past a music store in downtown Chicago. He usually avoided such places because they reminded him of too much. But this day, he happened to be passing just as someone inside opened the door, and through that open door came music. Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 3, his concerto. Elijah stopped dead in his tracks, frozen on the sidewalk as people flowed around him. The music poured over him like water, like light, like something he had forgotten existed in the world. He stood there for the entire first movement, tears running down his face, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except the music. When it ended, he felt something he hadn't felt in 25 years. He felt alive. That night in the shelter, Elijah lay on his cot and thought about his mother, about the sacrifices she had made, about the dreams she'd had for him, about the gift he had abandoned. No, not abandoned. That wasn't fair. He had been buried under circumstances beyond his control. But maybe that didn't have to be the end of the story. The next morning, Elijah did something he hadn't done in years. He went to the public library not to stay warm, but to use the computers. He searched for information about music programs, about charity organizations that helped homeless individuals. He filled out applications, wrote emails, made phone calls from the library's public phones. Most places didn't respond, but a few did. A community center on the west side ran a program that provided services and resources to homeless individuals trying to rebuild their lives. They had a piano in their recreation room, old and out of tune, but functional. Elijah started going there. At first, he just looked at the piano, unable to make himself sit down. It had been so long. What if he couldn't do it anymore? What if his hands didn't remember? But one evening when the center was nearly empty, He sat down. He placed his rough, scarred hands on the keys. And he played a single scale. C major, the most basic exercise there is. His fingers stumbled. The notes were uneven. It sounded terrible, but it was a start. Over the next 6 months, Elijah went to that community center every day it was open. He practiced on that terrible piano, slowly, painfully rebuilding technique he had lost. His fingers hurt. His back hurt from sitting on the wobbly bench. But he kept going. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep. His hands began to remember. Scales became arpeggios. Arpeggios became simple pieces. Simple pieces became complex ones. He wasn't where he had been 30 years ago. He knew that. He would never be that person again. Too much time had passed, too much had been lost. But maybe he could be something else. Something different, but still valuable. And then the invitation came. The community center had been selected by the Harmony Foundation's outreach program to receive invitations to the annual gala. They had 5 invitations to distribute among their clients. The center director, a kind woman named Ms. Patterson, thought immediately of Elijah. "I know this might be hard for you," she said, handing him the cream-colored envelope. "Going back into that world. But I also think maybe you need to do this. For yourself. To prove you're still here." Elijah held the invitation in his hands, staring at it. The Harmony Foundation Charity Gala. Celebrating excellence in music. It would be torture. Walking back into a world that had rejected him, surrounded by people who represented everything he had lost. But Ms. Patterson was right. He needed to do this. Not for them. For himself. To prove he was still Elijah Brooks. That all those years on the street hadn't erased who he fundamentally was. So here he was, sitting at a Steinway grand piano, in a ballroom full of people who despised him, about to attempt one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire with hands that hadn't seriously played in 3 decades. It was impossible. But then again, surviving 25 years on the streets had been impossible too. And he'd done that. The 6 months between hearing Rachmaninoff through that music store door and receiving the gala invitation were the hardest of Elijah's life. And that was saying something considering what he'd been through. Relearning piano after such a long absence wasn't like riding a bike. It wasn't something that just came back naturally. Every aspect of playing required conscious thought and effort. His fingers didn't want to cooperate. They were stiff from years of manual labor, the joints swollen, the tendons tight. The first few times he tried to play anything beyond simple scales, his hands cramped so badly he had to stop. But Elijah was nothing, if not stubborn. That same stubbornness that had kept him alive on the streets now focused on this new goal. He started slowly, painfully slowly. Hanon exercises the most basic finger training there is, the kind of thing beginners practice. 5-finger patterns. Simple major scales. The other people at the community center thought he was crazy. They'd see this weathered homeless man sitting at the beat-up piano for hours, playing the same exercises over and over, his face intense with concentration. "Why you doing that, man?" asked Curtis, another shelter resident, one day. "Ain't nobody gonna hire an old homeless dude as a piano player." Elijah didn't have a good answer. "I just need to," was all he said. Ms. Patterson, the center director, understood better. She had worked with homeless populations for 15 years and had seen every kind of trauma, every kind of loss. She recognized what she was seeing in Elijah, someone trying to reclaim a piece of himself that had been buried but not destroyed. She started staying late on the evenings Elijah practiced sitting in her office with the door open so she could hear. Sometimes she would come out and listen more directly, leaning against the doorframe of the recreation room. "You were really good, weren't you?" she asked him one night. "Before." Elijah's hands paused on the keys. "I thought I was going to be one of the greats. What happened?" So he told her. The whole story. His mother Juilliard, the accident, the slow dissolution of everything he'd built. He hadn't told anyone the complete story in decades. It felt strange to speak it aloud, to make it real again. Ms. Patterson listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's not failure," she finally said. "What you did for your mother, that was love. That was sacrifice. There's nothing shameful in that." "Tell that to Helena Rothstein," Elijah said bitterly. "Who's that?" He explained about Helena, about her position at the Chamberlain Academy, about how she had been one of his champions back at Juilliard before he left. How disappointed she had been. How she'd written him off as someone who couldn't handle the pressure, who wasn't dedicated enough. "Sounds like she's got her own issues," Ms. Patterson said. "Don't let other people's judgments define you, Elijah. You know your truth. That has to be enough." But it wasn't enough. Elijah needed more than just personal peace. He needed vindication. He needed to prove to himself, and to everyone who had written him off, that he was still Elijah Brooks. That the core of who he was hadn't been destroyed by circumstances. So he practiced harder. He pushed through the pain, the frustration, the moments when he wanted to slam the piano lid shut and walk away. After 2 months, he could play through most of the standard repertoire, Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven. Not perfectly, not at the level he'd once achieved, but competently. His fingers were remembering their old pathways, his brain reconnecting neural networks that had lain dormant. After 3 months, he attempted his first Rachmaninoff piece. Not the third concerto that was still too ambitious, but one of the preludes. It was rough, but it was recognizable. Ms. Patterson, listening from her office, felt tears prick her eyes. After 4 months, he could play through the first movement of the Rachmaninoff Third from memory. Not well. There were mistakes, hesitations, passages where his technique faltered, but he could get through it. That felt like a miracle. During this time, Elijah continued his life on the streets. He still slept in shelters or when they were full outside. He still did day labor when he could find it. He still experienced the daily indignities and dangers of homelessness. But now he had something to live for beyond just survival. He had purpose again. Direction. Hope. The other homeless individuals noticed the change in him. Curtis started calling him Maestro as a joke, but it stuck. Pretty soon half the shelter was calling him that. Some of them would gather in the recreation room when he practiced sitting on the worn couches listening. Play that Russian one someone would request. The dramatic one. And Elijah would play Rachmaninoff, and for a few minutes, they would all be transported somewhere else. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that wasn't a homeless shelter in a rough Chicago neighborhood. Music did that. It always had. It was why he'd fallen in love with it in the first place. When the gala invitation arrived, Elijah's first instinct was to refuse. The thought of walking into that world again, of facing people like Helena, of being judged and found wanting it, was terrifying. But Ms. Patterson wouldn't let him refuse. "This is what you've been working toward," she said. "You've spent 6 months preparing for this, even if you didn't know it. Go, show them who you are." "I don't even have anything to wear," Elijah protested. "I can't walk into a charity gala looking like this." Ms. Patterson smiled. "Let me worry about that." She rallied the community center staff and regular volunteers. They put together an outfit for Elijah. Not a tuxedo, they couldn't manage that, but clean slacks, a button-down shirt, and a jacket that was worn but presentable. They made sure he had access to showers, to a barber who volunteered to trim his hair and beard. On the day of the gala, Elijah stood in front of the community center's bathroom mirror and almost didn't recognize himself. He looked old, tired, weathered, but he also looked clean, dignified, human. "You got this, Maestro," Curtis said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Go show those rich people what's up." Elijah took the bus and then walked the last mile to the Grand Meridian Hotel. With every step, his anxiety grew. By the time he reached the entrance, his hands were shaking. But he didn't turn back. He walked up to that red carpet past the confused valets and the sneering guests, through the magnificent lobby into the ballroom. And now here he was, sitting at a piano in front of 500 people who expected him to fail, who wanted him to fail, because his failure would confirm their worldview that people like him, poor people, homeless people, people who had been broken by life, couldn't possibly be exceptional. Helena had chosen the Rachmaninoff Third on purpose. She remembered from 30 years ago that it had been his signature piece. By demanding he play it now, she was forcing him to confront the gap between who he had been and who he had become. She wanted to destroy him. What Helena didn't know, what no one in this room knew, was that Elijah had been practicing this piece obsessively for 6 months. It was the only thing he had practiced once he reached a certain level of technical proficiency. Every spare moment, every evening at the community center, he had worked on this concerto. Because some part of him had known he would end up here. That this confrontation was inevitable. That he would need this piece specifically to prove himself. Was he ready? No. Not really. 6 months of practice couldn't undo 30 years of absence. His technique was nowhere near what it had been at 20. His hands were older, stiffer, less reliable. But he knew this piece in his bones. He had performed it dozens of times in his youth, including once at Carnegie Hall to a standing ovation. It was part of him in a way that transcended technique. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Elijah took a deep breath. He positioned his hands over the keys, fingers curved, wrists relaxed as much as he could manage. The room was absolutely silent. He could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes on his back. He thought of his mother, of the sacrifices she had made, of the dreams she'd had for him, of the pride in her eyes when he'd been accepted to Juilliard. "This is for you, Mama," he whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. And then Elijah Brooks began to play. The opening of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 is one of the most recognizable beginnings in classical music. It starts with a simple, almost folk-like melody in D minor. Deceptively simple. Because what follows is anything but. Elijah's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes emerged into the hushed ballroom. They were tentative, quiet. Not quite the commanding opening the piece deserved. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed like Helena might be right, that this would be an embarrassing failure. But then something happened. Elijah's shoulders relaxed. His breathing deepened. His eyes closed. And the music began to flow. The melody strengthened, gained confidence. His left hand joined in providing the harmonic foundation, and suddenly the piano wasn't just an instrument, it was alive. The notes cascaded through the ballroom, rich and full, carrying emotion that had been locked away for 3 decades. At table 47, where Elijah had sat alone, 2 women who had mocked him earlier exchanged glances. One of them frowned, confused. This wasn't what she'd expected. Near the stage, Helena Rothstein stood frozen. Her arms still crossed, her expression unreadable, but her eyes had widened slightly. She was listening. Really listening. The piece progressed. Elijah moved into the first variation of the theme, his fingers gaining speed, the technical demands increasing. His right hand executed a series of rapid runs, ascending and descending the keyboard with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for someone who hadn't played in decades. People in the audience leaned forward in their seats. The mocking whispers had stopped. Now there was only attention fascination and the first hints of amazement. Gerald Morehouse, the developer who had orchestrated this challenge, sat at his front row table with his mouth slightly open. He had expected this to be entertaining, the cruel kind of entertainment that comes from watching someone fail spectacularly. Instead, he was witnessing something else entirely. Elijah played on, moving deeper into the first movement. The music swelled and ebbed, passionate and melancholic by turns. His whole body was engaged now, his shoulders, his back, his arms moving with the phrasing. This wasn't just technical proficiency. This was interpretation. Understanding. This was an artist who knew this piece intimately, who had lived with it, suffered with it, and was now pouring everything he had into it. About 3 minutes in, Elijah reached a particularly challenging passage, a series of rapid octave jumps in the right hand, while the left hand maintained a complex rhythmic pattern. It was a section that even skilled pianists sometimes stumbled over. Elijah's fingers flew. The octaves rang out clear and true, perfectly timed building tension before resolving into the next phrase. Someone in the audience actually gasped. Ms. Patterson, if she had been there, would have been crying. Curtis would have been cheering. But they weren't there. They were back at the community center, probably eating dinner, probably wondering how Elijah was doing. He was doing fine. Better than fine. He was alive again. At the 4-minute mark, Elijah moved into a quieter section, a brief respite before the storm to come. His playing became delicate, almost fragile, each note articulated with careful attention. This was the part where the piano sings, where the melody seems to float above the accompaniment, like something untethered from gravity. In the audience, people were pulling out their phones, not to mock now, but to record. To capture this unexpected moment. To have proof that they had witnessed something remarkable. A music critic who happened to be in attendance, a man named Robert Chen, who wrote for the Chicago Tribune, sat perfectly still, his trained ear cataloging what he was hearing. The technique was imperfect. There were small inaccuracies, moments where the timing wasn't quite right. But the musicality was undeniable. This wasn't a student playing notes. This was someone who understood the piece on a profound level, who was making artistic choices, who was communicating something essential. Who was this man? Helena remained standing near the stage, but her arms had uncrossed. She had gone pale. She was remembering something, a memory from 30 years ago. A young Elijah Brooks, brilliant and untouchable, performing this exact piece in a Juilliard recital hall. She had been there that night, had watched from the audience as he brought the house down. She had forgotten over the years just how exceptional he had been. The music continued to pour from the Steinway. Elijah was sweating now, the physical exertion of playing beginning to show, but his fingers didn't falter. They couldn't falter. Not now. Not when he was this close to proving himself. 6 minutes in, and the first movement was building toward its climax. The technical demands increased exponentially. Rapid chromatic scales, thick chords, hands crossing and recrossing. This was where lesser pianists fell apart, where technique had to be so ingrained it was automatic, because conscious thought couldn't move fast enough. Elijah's hands were a blur. The piano thundered, filled the ballroom with sound that seemed impossible to come from one instrument played by one person. The melody soared above it all, triumphant and aching at the same time. And then finally, he reached the moment of truth. The ossia cadenza. This was the section Helena had specifically mentioned, the most technically demanding part of the entire piece. An extended solo passage where the pianist is completely exposed with nowhere to hide. It required speed, power, delicacy, and endurance all at once. It was the musical equivalent of running a sprint while reciting poetry, while solving complex math problems. Most professional pianists avoided the ossia, choosing the slightly easier standard cadenza instead. Elijah took a breath. His hands repositioned, and he dove in. The ossia cadenza begins with a deceptive simplicity, a single melodic line, quiet and searching. But within seconds, it explodes into a cascade of notes, a torrent of sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. Elijah's fingers attacked the keyboard. There's no other word for it. The music demanded aggression, demanded commitment, and he gave it everything he had. His right hand executed impossible runs, while his left hand thundered out bass notes that shook the piano's frame. In the audience, people weren't just watching anymore, they were experiencing something. The sound was physically affecting them, vibrating in their chests, raising the hair on their arms. Several women had tears streaming down their faces. Men sat with their hands gripped on their armrests, knuckles white. This wasn't supposed to happen. This homeless man wasn't supposed to be capable of this. But he was. The cadenza continued relentless. Elijah's hands moved so fast they blurred. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't wipe it away. He couldn't spare the attention. Every ounce of his consciousness was focused on the music, on getting through this section, on making it to the other side. His left hand cramped. He felt it happen, felt the muscles seize up. But he pushed through it, forced his fingers to keep moving. Pain was nothing. He'd lived with pain for 25 years. This was just another kind. The cadenza builds and builds, getting louder, more intense, climbing toward an impossible climax. And then right when it seems like it can't get any bigger, it does. A series of crashing chords fortissimo that require the full weight of the body behind them. Elijah played them like he was fighting for his life, because in a way, he was. This performance was everything. His vindication, his redemption, his proof that he was still human, still valuable, still here. The final chord of the cadenza rang out massive and definitive. And then suddenly, silence. A brief pause before the orchestra's entrance, except there was no orchestra here, just Elijah and the piano. He had done it. He had made it through the ossia cadenza. His hands were shaking. His back ached. But he had done it. In the audience, people were on the edge of their seats, literally. The entire ballroom had shifted forward, drawn in by what they were witnessing. This was supposed to be a humiliation, a cautionary tale about knowing your place. Instead, it was becoming something else, something unexpected and profound. Helena Rothstein stood completely still, her face a mask. But inside, she was reeling. She had expected failure. She had chosen this piece specifically because she knew how difficult it was, how impossible it would be for someone in Elijah's condition to play it. She had been wrong. Patricia Hensworth leaned over to Helena and whispered, "My God, he's actually doing it." Helena didn't respond. She couldn't, because admitting Elijah was succeeding meant admitting she had been wrong about him 30 years ago. It meant confronting her own cruelty, both past and present, and that was something she wasn't ready to do. Elijah moved into the next section of the first movement. The dramatic intensity eased slightly, giving both performer and audience a chance to breathe. But the technical demands remained high. This was the section where the themes from earlier in the piece returned, transformed more complex. His playing had settled into a groove now. The initial nervousness was gone, burned away by the intensity of the performance. His hands knew what to do. They remembered. 30 years of absence hadn't erased the neural pathways, hadn't destroyed the connection between his brain and his fingers. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. And Elijah had built his through thousands of hours of practice in his youth. That foundation was still there, buried but intact. The music flowed. Sometimes it was tender, delicate, like a whispered secret. Sometimes it was powerful, demanding, filling every corner of the ballroom with sound. Elijah moved between these extremes effortlessly, his interpretation showing a maturity that hadn't been there in his youth. Because he had lived now. He had suffered. He had experienced loss and humiliation and despair. And all of that pain, all of those hard years poured into the music. It gave his playing a depth that no amount of technical perfection could achieve. At the 8-minute mark, he reached another extended passage of rapid 16th notes, both hands moving in parallel motion up and down the keyboard. It was a test of stamina and precision. Miss one note, and the entire passage falls apart. Elijah didn't miss. His hands flew precise and sure. The notes cascaded like water, like light, like something elemental and unstoppable. Gerald Morehouse, watching from his front row seat, shook his head in disbelief. He had orchestrated this as entertainment, as a cruel spectacle. Now he was witnessing something he would remember for the rest of his life. He felt for the first time in a very long time, genuinely moved. The music built again, heading toward the end of the first movement. The themes came together, interwoven, building tension for the final resolution. Elijah leaned into the keyboard. His entire body engaged, his face intense with concentration. And then, with a series of definitive chords, the first movement ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For a long moment, the ballroom existed in a state of suspended animation, everyone processing what they had just heard. And then, from somewhere in the middle of the audience, someone started to clap. Just one person at first. But then another joined in, and another. And within seconds, the entire ballroom was applauding. Not politely, not out of obligation, but genuinely enthusiastically overwhelmed by what they had witnessed. Elijah sat at the piano. His head bowed, his hands still on the keys. The applause washed over him like a wave. He felt it in his body, felt it in his bones. This was what he had been missing. Not the applause itself, but the connection. The shared experience of music, of communication through sound. He had forgotten how much he needed this. But the piece wasn't over. The first movement was just the beginning. The second and third movements still lay ahead. And while tradition allowed for applause between movements in a concerto, Elijah didn't want to break the spell. He didn't want to stop to give himself time to think, to let doubt creep back in. So without acknowledging the applause, without looking up at the audience, he immediately began the second movement, the intermezzo, the heart of the concerto. And this was where Elijah Brooks was going to break their hearts. If the first movement was about virtuosity and power, the second movement, the intermezzo, is about vulnerability and soul. It begins with a simple, haunting melody in the right hand, accompanied by gentle chords in the left. It's beautiful in a way that makes your chest ache. Melancholy, but not quite sad. Nostalgic. Yearning for something lost, and possibly beyond recovery. Elijah played it like he was praying. Each note was carefully shaped, given its own space to breathe and resonate. This wasn't about speed or technical difficulty. This was about communication, about reaching into the audience's chest and touching something essential. The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the servers who had been moving between tables clearing dishes had stopped. Everyone was listening. The melody developed, growing more complex, more ornate. Elijah's right hand sang out above his left hand's rolling accompaniment. It was the sound of memory, of looking back at a life once lived and wondering how you got from there to here. In the audience, people were crying openly now. Not just the women, the men too, because this music spoke to something universal. Everyone in that room had lost something. Everyone had dreams that didn't come true, paths not taken, people they missed. The intermezzo gave voice to that loss. Helena Rothstein felt something wet on her cheek and realized with shock that she was crying. She tried to stop to maintain her composure, but the tears kept coming. She was remembering Elijah as he had been 30 years ago, bright-eyed, talented, full of potential. She was remembering how proud she had been to know him, to call him a student from her institution. And she was remembering how quickly she had turned on him when he left, how she had spread gossip about his weakness, his inability to handle pressure, how she had actively discouraged anyone from working with him when he tried to come back years later. She had destroyed what remained of his career not through some grand conspiracy, but through 1,000 small acts of cruelty. A dismissive word here, a bad reference there. She had done it because his departure had felt like a personal betrayal, a rejection of everything she believed music should be. But listening to him play now, she realized something painful. He hadn't abandoned music. Circumstances had taken it from him. And maybe, just maybe, she had been too quick to judge, too harsh, too unwilling to show compassion. The intermezzo continued building slowly to its emotional climax. Elijah played a passage of thick, lush chords, the harmonies so rich they seemed to fill the entire ballroom. And then gradually the music began to recede, to grow quieter, simpler, returning to something close to the opening melody. As he played this final section of the intermezzo, Elijah thought about his mother. About the last time he'd seen her conscious, the last conversation they'd had. She had squeezed his hand and told him she was proud of him, that she'd always been proud of him, no matter what. "Don't give up on your music," she had whispered, her voice weak. "Promise me." He had promised. And then he'd watched her slip away a little more each day until there was nothing left. He had broken that promise. For 25 years, he'd broken it. But tonight, finally, he was making it right. The intermezzo ended with a simple cadence, gentle and resigned. The final chord hung in the air for a long moment before fading into silence. Again, nobody moved. The emotional weight of what they'd just experienced was too heavy. People sat in their chairs, stunned, processing. Robert Chen, the music critic, was frantically typing notes on his phone. This was a story. This was a headline. Homeless man delivers career-defining performance at charity gala. No, that wasn't right. Something better. He'd figure it out. But this was something special, something rare. Elijah transitioned immediately into the third movement, the finale. Where the first movement had been technically demanding, and the second emotionally devastating, the third movement was pure unbridled joy. It was Rachmaninoff at his most exuberant a celebration of life and music and the sheer thrill of playing. After everything he'd been through, the loss, the suffering, the degradation, Elijah channeled all of it into this final movement. Every hard year, every cold night, every moment of despair. And he transformed it. He alchemized suffering into something beautiful. His hands raced across the keyboard. The music was fast, joyful, almost manic. It had a folk dance quality, hints of Russian melodies embedded in classical structures. It was music that made you want to move to dance, to celebrate being alive. And Elijah was celebrating. For the first time in decades, he felt truly, completely alive. His fingers flew sure and strong. The pain in his hands, the cramping in his back, none of it mattered. He was beyond pain. He was beyond doubt. He was exactly where he belonged. The third movement is shorter than the first two, but it's relentless. It barely gives the performer time to breathe. Theme after theme, variation after variation, building and building toward an explosive conclusion. In the audience, people had gone from stunned silence to active engagement. Some were tapping their feet. Others were nodding along with the rhythm. The music was infectious, impossible to resist. Helena watched Elijah's hands, remembered watching those same hands 30 years ago. He had always had a gift for the finale, for channeling pure joy into sound. That hadn't changed. If anything, it was stronger now, deepened by everything he'd endured. She had been wrong about him. So completely, utterly wrong. The realization sat heavy in her chest, uncomfortable and unavoidable. The third movement raced toward its conclusion. Elijah was flying now, completely in the zone, that magical state where thought and action merge, where your body knows what to do without conscious intervention. This was why he had become a pianist in the first place, for these moments when you transcended yourself and became pure music. The themes from earlier in the concerto returned transformed, woven together in a final triumphant statement. His left hand pounded out octaves, while his right hand soared above the melody, clear and powerful. Sweat poured down his face. His shirt was soaked through. His hands ached, screamed at him to stop. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he was this close. The music built, and built louder, faster, more intense. It was almost overwhelming, on the verge of chaos. But Elijah held it together through sheer force of will, through decades of training that couldn't be erased even by years of disuse. And then finally, he reached the last page, the final section, a series of massive chords fortissimo, requiring every ounce of strength he had left. He played them like he was shattering glass, like he was breaking through a wall that had held him captive for 25 years. Each chord was a declaration, a statement of victory. The penultimate chord rang out huge and defiant, and then one final chord, D major, bright, triumphant, definitive. Elijah played it with everything he had. His entire body weight behind it, his arms extended, his hands flat on the keys. The sound filled the ballroom, resonated in the walls, in the floor, in every person sitting there. And then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Elijah sat motionless at the piano, his hands still on the keys, his head bowed. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. Tears streamed down his face, dripping onto the keyboard. He had done it. Against all odds, against every expectation, he had done it. He had played the Rachmaninoff third, the complete first movement, intermezzo and finale. All of it, perfectly no. There had been small errors, moments where his technique faltered. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he had played it with soul, with understanding, with the kind of artistry that couldn't be taught or faked. He had proven himself. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 3. And then from the front row, Gerald Morehouse stood up. Slowly, deliberately, he began to clap. Others joined him. Row by row, person by person, the entire ballroom rose to its feet. The applause started as a ripple and became a roar, a thunderous sound that dwarfed anything that had come before. People were cheering now, actually cheering. Strangers were hugging each other, overcome with emotion. Phones were out everywhere, capturing the moment. This was the standing ovation, the one we saw at the very beginning of this story, the moment when everything changed. Elijah slowly lifted his head and turned to face the audience. His vision was blurred with tears, but he could see them all standing, applauding, celebrating him. Not with pity, not with condescension, but with genuine appreciation, with respect. He saw wealthy donors who had sneered at him earlier, now clapping with tears in their eyes. He saw young music students who had performed earlier in the evening, their faces awestruck. He saw servers and hotel staff who had gathered at the edges of the ballroom, applauding just as enthusiastically as the guests. And he saw Helena Rothstein. She was standing with the others, but she wasn't clapping. She was crying openly, weeping, her carefully applied makeup running in dark streams down her face. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and for a long moment, neither looked away. In that moment, everything that needed to be said passed between them wordlessly. Her cruelty, his pain, her regret, his forgiveness. Because Elijah realized, standing there, that he had already forgiven her. Holding on to anger would have poisoned his performance, would have turned the music bitter. So he had let it go somewhere in the middle of the intermezzo, and now all that remained was sadness for time lost, and compassion for two people who had both been hurt by life in different ways. Helena nodded slightly, acknowledging something unspoken. Then she raised her hands and began to clap, joining the ovation. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Elijah stood there, taking it in, letting himself feel it. This moment had been earned through 30 years of suffering, 6 months of practice, and a lifetime of dedication to music. He had earned this. Finally, the applause began to fade. People sat back down, wiping their eyes, composing themselves. The evening still had to continue. There was dinner to serve, other entertainment planned. But everyone knew nothing else that night would come close to what they had just witnessed. Brandon Michaels, the MC, returned to the stage looking somewhat shaken. He had been backstage listening, as affected as everyone else. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice not quite steady, "Elijah Brooks." Another round of applause, though shorter. Elijah nodded in acknowledgement, then slowly made his way off the stage. His legs were shaky. He felt drained, exhausted, empty in the best possible way. As he descended the steps, Helena intercepted him. She stood in his path, forcing him to stop and face her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Helena said simply, "I'm sorry." 2 words. Not enough, could never be enough to make up for 30 years of dismissal and cruelty, but it was a start. "I know," Elijah said quietly. "I was wrong about you, about what you did, why you left. She struggled for words. "I was cruel, and I'm sorry." Elijah looked at her, really looked at her, and saw an old woman burdened by regret. Just another human being who had made mistakes and was trying to figure out how to make them right. "We all make choices based on what we understand at the time," he said. "You didn't know what I was going through. I should have tried to know." Helena insisted. "I should have asked, should have listened, should have—" She trailed off, overwhelmed. "It's okay," Elijah said, and found that he meant it. The anger he'd carried, the resentment, had been burned away by the music. "It's okay." Helena nodded, unable to speak further, and stepped aside. As Elijah made his way through the ballroom, people stopped him constantly. Everyone wanted to talk to him, to shake his hand, to tell him how moved they were by his performance. Gerald Morehouse, the developer who had challenged him to play in the first place, approached with an outstretched hand and a sheepish expression. "Mr. Brooks, I owe you an apology. I thought I was setting up some kind of entertainment. I didn't realize—" He shook his head. "That was extraordinary, truly extraordinary." "Thank you," Elijah said simply. "Have you eaten? Please join my table. It's the least I can do." Before Elijah could respond, someone else approached a woman in her 50s wearing an elegant black gown. She had an air of authority, of someone used to being listened to. "Mr. Brooks," she said, extending a business card. "I'm Margaret Claiborne, director of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I would very much like to speak with you about performing with us. We're planning a Rachmaninoff series next season, and after hearing what you just did," she smiled, "I think you'd be perfect." Elijah took the card with trembling hands. The Chicago Symphony, one of the finest orchestras in the world. Him performing with them. It seemed impossible. But then all of this seemed impossible. Yes, he managed. "I'd like that very much." More people approached. A talent agent. A representative from a recording company. The music critic Robert Chen, who wanted an exclusive interview. A documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell Elijah's story. It was overwhelming. Just hours ago, he had been nobody, less than nobody, invisible. Now he was the center of attention, not out of pity or curiosity, but because of his talent, his artistry, his value as a musician. Eventually, Ms. Patterson from the community center appeared. She had heard about what happened. News traveled fast, especially on social media, and had rushed over to the hotel. When she found Elijah in the crowd, she pushed through and hugged him tightly. "You did it," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you," Elijah said. "Without the center, without having a place to practice." "You did this yourself," she insisted. "I just gave you access to a piano. Everything else was you." As the evening continued, arrangements were made. Gerald Morehouse, feeling guilty about his earlier behavior, offered to put Elijah up in a hotel room for the next month, while more permanent housing could be arranged. The Harmony Foundation, embarrassed by how one of their guests had been treated, offered to help with any immediate needs. Margaret Claiborne from the Symphony scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss performance opportunities. The recording company wanted to do a session, maybe an album, focused on Rachmaninoff. The documentary filmmaker already had investors interested. It was all happening so fast. Elijah felt dizzy with it, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in his circumstances. "Take it slow," Ms. Patterson advised. "You don't have to make any decisions tonight. Just enjoy this moment." So he did. He sat at one of the tables, not table 47 in the back, but a table near the front, where people actually wanted his company. He ate food he hadn't ordered from the menu courses that appeared like magic from the kitchen. He drank water from crystal glasses and engaged in conversations about music, about art, about the philosophy of performance. For the first time in 25 years, Elijah Brooks felt like he belonged somewhere. Patricia Hensworth. Helena's colleague, who had been so dismissive earlier, approached him. She looked embarrassed. "Mr. Brooks, I wanted to apologize for my behavior when you arrived. I had no idea." "It's fine," Elijah said, cutting her off gently. He was tired of apologies, tired of people feeling guilty. "You didn't know." "None of you did." But she persisted. "It's not fine, though. We judged you based on your appearance on assumptions. That's not acceptable, especially from people in arts education who should know better." She paused. "For what it's worth, what you did tonight. It reminded me why I got into music in the first place, to experience moments like that, to witness something transcendent." Elijah nodded. "Then let that be the lesson. Not the apology, but the reminder." As midnight approached, the gala began to wind down. Guests started to leave, thanking the organizers, still buzzing about the performance they had witnessed. It would be talked about for years to come, the night the homeless man played Rachmaninoff at the Harmony Foundation gala. Elijah stood to leave as well. He had Gerald's hotel key in his pocket, directions to the room where he could actually sleep in a bed tonight instead of on a shelter cot or a sidewalk. It felt surreal. As he walked toward the exit, he passed the stage one more time. The Steinway sat there in the dimmed lights, silent now. He paused and looked at it, remembering. A voice from behind him said, "You and that piano have history." He turned to find Helena standing there. She had removed her makeup, or what was left of it, and looked older and more vulnerable without it. "We do," Elijah agreed. "When you played tonight," Helena said slowly, "I heard something I didn't expect. Not just technical skill, I knew you had that once, but maturity, depth, pain that informed the music instead of undermining it." She looked at him directly. "You're a better musician now than you were at 20. Do you know that Elijah considered this? I think maybe I am. Because I understand now what the music is about. Loss and joy and endurance. I couldn't have played the intermezzo like that at 20 because I hadn't lost anything yet." Helena nodded. "That's the thing they don't tell young musicians. Technical perfection is impressive, but ultimately hollow. Real artistry requires having lived." She smiled sadly. "I'm sorry it took so much pain to give you that understanding." "I'm not," Elijah said, surprising himself. "I wouldn't choose what happened. But I can't regret it either because it made me who I am. And who I am might be enough." They stood together in silence for a moment, two people who had traveled very different paths to arrive at the same moment of understanding. "Will you come by the academy?" Helena asked. "Not to apologize further, I think we've done enough of that. But to talk. About music. About teaching, maybe. We have students who could benefit from your perspective." "Maybe," Elijah said. "Let's see how the next few weeks go." Helena nodded and turned to leave. But then she paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, Elijah, your mother would be very proud of you tonight." And with that, she was gone. Elijah stood alone in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of the gala, abandoned tables, wilting flowers, chairs pushed back. But in the center of it all, the piano remained, waiting for the next person who would sit down and pour their soul into its keys. That night, Elijah Brooks slept in a hotel bed for the first time in 25 years. The sheets were clean and soft. The mattress firm, but comfortable. The room had heating that actually worked, a bathroom with hot water, a window that looked out over the city lights of Chicago. But he couldn't sleep. Not yet. He sat by the window in the provided hotel robe, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, people were still living on the streets. Somewhere, someone was sleeping under a bridge, wondering if they'd make it through another night. somewhere someone was giving up on dreams they used to have. He thought about Curtis and the others at the community center, about Ms. Patterson, who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself, about his mother gone for decades, but still present in every choice he made. And he thought about the piano, about the music that had saved his life, that had given him a reason to keep going when everything else was gone. In the morning, he would wake up and start figuring out this new life. He would meet with the symphony director, talk to the recording company, maybe accept some of those offers that had come flooding in. He would find permanent housing, nothing fancy but something stable. He would start rebuilding slowly and carefully. But more importantly, he would go back to the community center. He would thank Ms. Patterson properly. He would sit at that terrible out-of-tune piano and play for Curtis and the others, because they deserved to hear the music too, because they had been there when no one else was. And maybe, just maybe, he would start teaching. Not at a prestigious academy, not yet anyway, but at the community center for other people who thought their dreams were lost. He would show them that it's never too late, that circumstances don't define you, that talent and passion don't disappear just because life gets hard. As the sun began to rise over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elijah made himself a promise. The same promise he had made to his mother 30 years ago, the one he had broken, but was now keeping again. He would not give up on music. Ever again. No matter what happened, no matter what obstacles appeared, he would keep playing. Because music wasn't just something he did, it was who he was. And no amount of hardship could change that fundamental truth. He thought about the people in the ballroom tonight, about their initial disgust turning to amazement, about Helena's tears and apologies, about the standing ovation that seemed to last forever. But the moment he would remember most, the one he would carry with him for the rest of his life, wasn't the applause or the accolades. It was simpler than that. It was the moment his fingers first touched the keys after 30 years away. That instant when he realized that despite everything, despite all the time and pain and loss, he could still do this. He could still make music. That was the miracle. Not the performance itself, but the realization that the essential part of himself, the part that connected to music, that understood it, that could channel something beautiful into the world, was still there. Battered and bruised, buried under years of survival, but still there. Still alive. Still capable of extraordinary things. Elijah smiled his first genuine smile in longer than he could remember. Tomorrow would bring challenges, complications, the hard work of rebuilding a life. But tonight, just for this moment, he allowed himself to simply be happy. He was Elijah Brooks. He was a pianist. And against all odds, against every expectation, he had found his way back home. The piano was waiting for him. Not just the Steinway at the gala, but pianos everywhere in concert halls and community centers, in hotels and homes, in every place where someone sat down to translate emotion into sound. And he would play them all. Because that's what pianists do. They play. They create beauty from pain, joy from sorrow, hope from despair. They remind us that we are more than our circumstances, that art transcends everything, that the human spirit is capable of endurance and redemption. Elijah stood up from the window and walked to the bed. As he lay down on those impossibly soft sheets, he closed his eyes and heard music in his mind. Not Rachmaninoff this time, but something else, something new, Maybe something he would compose himself someday. A melody that captured everything he had learned, everything he had survived, everything he had become. It was a beautiful melody, full of pain and joy, loss and redemption, endings and beginnings all woven together. And as sleep finally claimed him, Elijah Brooks smiled again because he knew something now that he hadn't known before. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning.